The scream tore through the silence of the night, echoing like shattered glass across the narrow street. Emily clutched her chest, gasping as if the weight of years of silence finally erupted in one violent sound. Emily said, "I cannot keep living unseen, not another day." Her voice cracked but carried the sharp edge of truth. The world had always demanded she stay quiet, blending into shadows, but now her heart thundered with rage and fear. Her trembling hands brushed against the rough brick wall, grounding her as the chaos within threatened to consume her. The rain, cold and relentless, fell harder, as though the sky itself wept with her. A figure passed in the distance, unmoved by her cry, and the loneliness cut deeper. Emily whispered to herself, "I am more than their silence." Every doubt, every insult, every moment of being dismissed now pressed against her like a suffocating weight. She felt as if all eyes that had ignored her now turned inward, demanding proof of her worth. She stood, soaked, trembling, but unwilling to collapse. Her story would no longer be written in silence. Tonight was the breaking point. Tonight was the beginning. Morning came heavy, the streets washed clean, but her spirit still storm-tossed. Emily sat on the edge of her small bed, staring at peeling wallpaper. Emily said, "Last night changed me." Her voice was hushed, like she feared the silence might swallow it. The room felt suffocating, a cage built by years of hesitation. She thought of her family's whispers, their constant reminders of what she wasn't. She clenched her fists, breathing slow. Emily said, "I cannot live waiting for permission." The sun broke through the thin curtains, catching her eyes, almost mocking her doubts. She had lived too long as an afterthought, the quiet girl in the corner. Now, the choice loomed: remain unseen or step forward. Her chest tightened, fear still sharp, but under it was a strange heat, something alive. At work, the chatter of colleagues felt like a foreign language she never belonged to. Emily adjusted her papers nervously, as laughter echoed across the open office. Her colleague Daniel, 32-year-old male, sharp features, sarcastic tone, glanced at her. Daniel said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily forced a smile, but her chest still carried last night's weight. She muttered, "Maybe I have." His brow lifted, curious, but he turned back to his screen. Emily's silence had always been easy to ignore. Yet today, each word, each look, pressed against her ribs. She wondered if they could sense her breaking point, if the world could hear the storm she had released. She said under her breath, "I want to stay invisible." Lunch was quiet, the cafeteria humming with noise she wasn't part of. Emily sat alone at a corner table, her tray untouched. A memory stabbed, her mother saying, "You're not meant for more." Her throat tightened as if the words still strangled her. Across the room, Daniel caught her eye, his expression unreadable. He walked over, sliding into the chair across from her. Daniel said, "You keep hiding, but storms don't vanish by looking away." She stiffened, startled by his bluntness. Emily whispered, "I'm not hiding anymore." The words surprised her. They felt dangerous, like sparks too close to fuel. Daniel studied her, silent, but a flicker of respect passed through his eyes. For the first time she didn't look down. The evening sky burned orange as Emily walked home, her wet shoes slapping pavement. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. She remembered last night's scream, how it shattered her silence, and she clung to that spark. Emily said, "I cannot fade again." Her chest felt lighter, though fear still whispered. The city moved around her, strangers brushing past, blind to her struggle. Yet, she no longer felt invisible. The storm had cracked something open, a fracture that let light bleed through. Emily whispered, "This is only the beginning." For the first time, her words didn't feel like a plea. They felt like truth. Emily walked through the office hall, her steps slow but steady. Every portrait on the wall seemed to glare, reminding her of those who had achieved what she had never dared to chase. She touched her notebook tightly, afraid her thoughts might escape. Emily said, "I have carried silence too long." Her words slipped out like a confession, almost swallowed by the hum of the corridor. A group of co-workers laughed ahead, their voices sharp reminders of her distance from them. Her pulse raced, fear rising like a familiar tide, but something inside her refused to retreat. She inhaled deeply, letting the air burn in her chest. Emily thought of the storm and her scream that refused to be buried. She whispered, "They cannot drown me anymore." Her reflection on the glass door stared back, tired, fragile, but alive. She lingered on it, as if asking herself whether that face could finally claim its place. At her desk, Emily stared at the blank page, pen trembling in her hand. The hum of keyboards around her was deafening, though no one noticed her stillness. Emily muttered, "Say it out loud, write it down, something." Her words fell heavy, too fragile to take root. Daniel walked past, glancing at her notebook with a half smile. Daniel said, "Thinking hard or just afraid to start?" His voice stung, but it cracked through the fog in her chest. She looked up, meeting his eyes, not flinching. Emily replied, "Afraid has ruled long enough." The words startled even her, a spark in the silence. He smirked, but there was no malice, only curiosity. She pressed the pen down, ink bleeding into the page like the first step across a long bridge. Emily stepped outside during lunch, air crisp with early autumn chill. She sat on a bench near the courtyard, leaves scattered at her feet. The world moved around her, co-workers chatting in clusters while she sat apart. She pulled out her notebook again, words half-formed on the page. Emily whispered, "Do I have the courage to let this voice live?" Her chest rose sharply with the question, the fear laced with fragile hope. Daniel appeared again, coffee in hand, stopping a few feet away. He said, "You talk to yourself more than you talk to people." His tone was teasing but edged with honesty. Emily gave a small smile, surprising herself. She replied, "Maybe it's time I change that." For a heartbeat, silence passed between them, the kind that doesn't weigh heavy, but instead opens a door. The afternoon dragged on, yet Emily's thoughts refused to quiet. She found herself in the break room, staring at the vending machine as though its glow held answers. Her hands clenched into fists before she relaxed them. Emily said softly, "I cannot keep waiting for someone else to see me." Her voice trembled but stayed steady. Daniel entered, his eyes catching hers briefly before he poured coffee. He said, "You don't need permission, just act." His blunt tone hit her like cold water, but the truth in it couldn't be denied. She nodded faintly, though her chest still carried the old fear. Emily whispered, "Then maybe it's time." Her reflection in the glass of the vending machine stared back, and this time, the woman she saw did not seem small. Evening came with long shadows stretching across the city. Emily walked home slowly, notebook tucked under her arm, its weight more like promise than burden. The streets buzzed with strangers, headlights glinting against wet asphalt. She remembered Daniel's words, simple, cutting, but unshakable. Emily said, "I will not wait anymore." She felt the echo of her scream from 2 nights ago, no longer raw but forging into something stronger. Fear still curled at the edges, yet beneath it burned a new resolve. She knew storms would rise again, but now she would meet them head-on. She whispered, "I am learning to fight for myself." With every step, her shadow stretched longer, as though the world was finally making space for her. The morning air felt heavy as Emily entered the office, her shoulders squared yet trembling beneath her coat. Whispers swirled behind her, fragments of gossip carried on careless voices. Emily said, "They see only weakness." Her words were hushed but sharp, meant only for herself. She clutched her notebook like a shield, its pages filled with thoughts she feared to share. A sudden laugh burst from a corner, loud and mocking, though she knew it wasn't meant for her. It still pierced deep. Daniel caught her eye briefly, his gaze serious but unreadable. He said, "You'll have to decide how much of this you can take." His bluntness struck like a knife, but she refused to flinch. Emily whispered, "No more shadows." For the first time she moved toward her desk with a steadiness that felt dangerous. By midday, the sting of rejection had cut deeper. Emily overheard 2 colleagues muttering near the copier, their voices lowered but not enough. One said, "She doesn't belong here." The words echoed like hammers inside her chest. Emily gripped the edge of her desk, nails biting into the wood, fighting tears. Daniel appeared, leaning casually against her desk, but his eyes were sharp. He said, "Why do you let them decide who you are?" Emily's throat tightened. She whispered, "Because I don't know who I am without their judgment." He raised a brow, no sympathy in his gaze. Daniel said, "Then maybe it's time you find out." His blunt truth struck harder than the whispers. Emily exhaled shakily, the heat of anger mixing with the cold of fear. The cafeteria buzzed louder than usual, voices colliding into a wall of sound. Emily sat alone again, tray untouched, her mind replaying the words she had heard. She whispered, "Invisible, unwanted, replaceable." Each word felt heavier. Daniel appeared with his own tray, sitting across without asking. He said, "You repeat their words until you believe them. Stop giving them that power." Emily stared at him, surprise mixing with defiance. She muttered, "You make it sound easy." Daniel smirked faintly, taking a bite before replying, "It's not easy, but it's necessary." She looked down at her hands trembling against the table, and for the first time felt the anger more than the pain. Emily whispered, "Then, I'll try." Her voice was soft, but her fists tightened with resolve. Later that afternoon, Emily found herself in the stairwell, the one place where the noise couldn't reach. She pressed her back against the cool concrete wall, notebook clutched against her chest. Her mind swirled with years of rejection, family's doubts, and her own silence. Emily said, "They won't break me this time." The words echoed faintly, bouncing against the stairwell walls. Daniel appeared unexpectedly, his footsteps steady as he climbed toward her. He stopped a few steps below, looking up. He said, "Talking to ghosts or talking to yourself?" She flushed but didn't retreat. Emily answered, "To the part of me that refuses to die." His expression shifted, the faintest trace of respect crossing his features. Silence hung, but it wasn't crushing. It was heavy with truth. Evening draped the city in cold light as Emily walked home, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. Yet beneath the fatigue, something burned brighter. Every insult replayed in her head, every dismissal, every quiet wound. Emily said, "I will not carry their chains anymore." Her voice steadied with each word, though no one walked beside her. The glow of passing headlights painted her face in fleeting colors, blue, yellow, red. She clutched her notebook tighter, the ink inside it now feeling like armor. She whispered, "I will rise even if they drag me down." Her steps grew firmer with each block, the rhythm echoing determination. For the first time, she felt the night wasn't swallowing her, it was listening. The office felt unusually quiet that morning, yet Emily's chest carried the noise of storms. She sat at her desk, her notebook open, words scribbled in jagged lines. Daniel approached, coffee in hand, his eyes scanning the page before she could close it. He said, "That looks like the voice you're afraid to share." Emily's breath caught, heat rising to her face. She muttered, "It's not ready." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Daniel said, "It will never be ready if you wait forever." His words were sharp, cutting through her excuses. Emily looked down at the ink, her hand trembling. She whispered, "I'm afraid they'll tear it apart." Daniel's tone softened slightly, though still blunt. He said, "They will, but you'll survive. That's the point." She met his eyes and for the first time didn't look away. Emily found herself pacing in the stairwell during a short break, notebook clutched tight. The echo of her footsteps filled the space. Daniel appeared again, leaning casually against the railing. He said, "You run to corners, but corners don't save you." His voice was steady, direct. Emily snapped back. "You think it's that simple? You don't carry what I carry." Her voice cracked, but her anger pushed through. Daniel didn't flinch. He replied, "Everyone carries something. Yours just screams louder because you keep it locked inside." She froze, his bluntness slicing deep. Emily whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Daniel stepped closer, his tone harsher now. He said, Strength doesn't show up first. You build it after you leap. Her chest tightened, but his words lingered like fire. That afternoon, Emily sat alone in the cafeteria, pushing food around her tray. Daniel dropped into the seat across from her without invitation. He said, "You'll waste away hiding behind silence." Emily's jaw tightened, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She muttered, "I'm trying, but trying feels like drowning." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low and cutting. He said, "Then stop waiting for the water to pull you under. Start swimming." His words hit like stone, blunt but impossible to ignore. Emily's eyes filled with frustrated tears, but she forced them back. She whispered, "Why do you care?" Daniel shrugged, but his gaze didn't waver. He said, "Because I know you're stronger than you act." Her heart pounded at the rare honesty beneath his harsh tone. Emily stayed late at the office, the quiet hum of machines surrounding her. She stared at the notebook, open to pages filled with jagged thoughts. Daniel passed by, pausing when he saw her still there. He said, "You're either writing your way out or burying yourself deeper." Emily exhaled heavily, running a hand through her hair. She said, "Maybe both." He stepped closer, his tone more forceful. Daniel said, "Stop thinking of it as survival. Start thinking of it as war. Silence has beaten you long enough." Emily's chest tightened as his words clawed at her fear. She whispered, "War means losing something." Daniel replied, "You've been losing all along. At least this way you fight back." For the first time her fingers didn't close the notebook. They pressed harder to the page. That night, Emily walked home through near-empty streets, her notebook clutched tightly under her arm. The air was cold, the pavement slick with rain. She remembered Daniel's words, harsh but undeniable. Emily whispered, "I've been losing all along." The truth stung, but it didn't break her. Instead, it stirred something fierce. She looked at the city lights glowing against the wet asphalt, reflections stretching endlessly. Emily said, "Then I'll fight." The words felt heavier than any she had spoken before, yet steady as stone. For the first time she believed them. Her steps quickened, not away from fear but into it. The night seemed less like an enemy, and more like a stage waiting for her voice. She clutched her notebook tighter, as though it was a sword finally unsheathed. Emily arrived early, the office nearly empty, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. She opened her notebook, ready to face the page, but a folded slip of paper slipped out between the sheets. Her heart froze. It wasn't her handwriting. She opened it slowly, reading words that pierced deeper than gossip. "They'll never respect you. You're only here because no one else wanted this desk." The cruelty was precise, deliberate. Emily whispered, "Someone wanted me to find this." Her chest tightened, shame burning like fire. Daniel appeared, noticing her pale face. He asked, "What is it?" She hesitated, then handed him the note. He scanned it, jaw tightening. Daniel said, "This is meant to break you. Don't let it win." Emily swallowed hard, trembling, but a strange heat began to rise. The whispers spread faster than wildfire. By midday, Emily felt eyes linger on her longer than usual, snickers rising when she passed. Her chest burned as she realized the note wasn't just cruel. It was bait. Someone had spread her private fears. Emily muttered, "They know." Daniel caught up with her near the stairwell, his tone cutting through the noise. He said, "So what if they know? Their laughter isn't your death sentence." Emily's voice cracked. She said, "It feels like one." His jaw clenched, his bluntness rising again. He replied, "Then rewrite the sentence. You're not their joke unless you choose to be." His words struck hard, but instead of breaking her, they rooted deeper than the mockery surrounding her. At lunch, Emily sat alone, but this time, the silence was shattered by laughter from a nearby table. A coworker whispered loud enough for her to hear, "She thinks she belongs here." Her hands shook around her fork. Daniel entered, tray in hand, and caught the scene instantly. He dropped his tray beside her, the noise silencing a few voices. He said, "If they're loud enough to laugh, they're weak enough to fear you speaking." Emily's eyes widened, fear twisting with anger. She whispered, "Fear me? I don't even trust myself." Daniel smirked faintly. He said, "Then maybe it's time you learn to." His words cut sharper than the laughter, but this time she didn't lower her eye. Instead, she clenched her fists beneath the table. That afternoon, Emily found the courage to confront her fear. She entered the small meeting room where a group of colleagues had gathered, laughter still echoing. She stood in the doorway, her hands trembling but her voice steady. Emily said, "I know what you've been saying. I know what you think." Silence fell, the room heavy with surprise. Her pulse pounded, but she refused to step back. She continued, "You don't get to write my worth. You don't get to decide who I am." Daniel lingered outside, watching, not interfering. For once, her words weren't whispers, they were fire. The faces staring back showed discomfort, even shame. Emily felt her chest expand with something new, not fear, but defiance. That evening, Emily walked alone through the city streets, her chest lighter than it had been in years. The betrayal had cut deep, but her voice had burned louder. She whispered, "They wanted me broken. Instead, I found myself." The streetlights flickered against the damp pavement, the glow bouncing in fractured reflections. She clutched her notebook tighter, not as a shield, but as proof of her survival. Daniel's words repeated in her mind, sharp, unforgiving, but true. Emily said, "Fear doesn't own me anymore." For the first time, the night air didn't feel heavy. It felt open, wide, endless. The city no longer pressed her into the shadows. Instead, it stretched before her, daring her to keep walking. The meeting room buzzed with tension, colleagues gathered around the long table, papers scattered like weapons. Emily sat at the far end, notebook open, her pulse hammering in her ears. She knew this was the moment. The manager looked directly at her and said, "Do you have anything to contribute?" Silence followed, pressing like a weight against her chest. Every doubt screamed, every memory of mockery pulled her down. Emily gripped her pen, hands trembling, but this time she didn't fold. She said, "Yes, I do." Her voice cut through the stillness, steady, though her heart shook. Gasps rippled, eyes fixed on her, some skeptical, some surprised. She lifted her notebook, pages filled with ideas she had hidden for too long. Emily whispered inside, "This is the fight." Emily rose from her chair, the room's focus sharpening like a blade. Her voice grew firmer as she spoke, outlining her thoughts with clarity she never believed she possessed. She said, "I've listened long enough to silence. Here's what needs to change." Her words struck with conviction, each sentence carrying the weight of years suppressed. Daniel, seated at the side, gave a small nod, his usual sarcasm absent, replaced with quiet approval. A colleague muttered, "She's serious." Emily locked eyes with the manager, refusing to break. The room felt electric, the air thick with shock and unspoken challenge. Emily whispered to herself, "I will not vanish again." For the first time, her voice didn't tremble, it carried. The manager leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowed as though weighing her every word. Tension clawed at the walls. He said, "That's bold. Do you think you can carry the weight of this change?" Emily's chest tightened, but she steadied her breath. She answered, "I've carried worse in silence. Now I'll carry it in truth." The sharpness in her voice startled even her. Daniel smirked faintly, pride flickering in his gaze. Murmurs spread among the group, doubt mixed with reluctant respect. Emily's palms still sweated, her body trembling, yet her words held. For the first time she didn't fear their judgment, she demanded it. The silence that followed was no longer suffocating. It was acknowledgement. The confrontation ignited sparks. One colleague scoffed loudly, saying, "This is naive. You don't know what you're talking about." The dismissal cut, but Emily refused to retreat. She said, "I know exactly what I'm talking about, because I've lived it." Her voice rose, sharper than the scoff. Daniel leaned forward, eyes locked on her as though urging her to push further. Emily's body trembled, but her words were fire. She said, "Your laughter won't erase me. Your silence won't bury me. I am done being unseen." The air snapped with tension. The colleague who mocked her fell quiet, unease in his expression. For once, the storm inside Emily wasn't breaking her. It was breaking free. By the end of the meeting, Emily felt both drained and alive. The silence of dismissal had been replaced with the weight of acknowledgement. She stepped outside into the evening air, the city glowing with neon and dusk light. Her chest expanded with every breath, no longer crushed by shadows. Emily whispered, "This was only the beginning." She clutched her notebook, now not just a shield but a weapon she had wielded. "Oh." Daniel joined her outside, sipping coffee, his voice steady. He said, "Now they've heard you. Don't let them forget." Emily met his gaze and replied, "I won't." Her words didn't tremble. The night sky above stretched wide, no longer heavy, just open, waiting. The morning after the storm of confrontation, Emily walked into the office with her shoulders no longer hunched. The air felt different, lighter. The whispers still followed her. She didn't shrink. Emily thought, "I have survived their silence. I will survive their noise." Daniel passed her at the doorway, raising a brow. He said, "You're standing taller today." Emily smirked faintly, replying, "I'm finally breathing." His sarcasm softened into something resembling pride. She stepped into the room, her notebook tucked under her arm, not as armor, but as proof. Every glance no longer felt like an attack, but recognition. For the first time, the office didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a battlefield she had already survived. Later in the break room, Emily poured coffee with hands steady as stone. A colleague who had once mocked her entered, hesitating before speaking. He said, "What you said yesterday, it made people think." Emily turned, surprised by the crack in his tone. She replied, "I didn't speak to please anyone. I spoke because silence was killing me." His eyes lowered, shame flickering. Daniel appeared at the doorway, catching the moment, saying nothing, just watching. For the first time, Emily didn't feel the need to shrink. She whispered to herself, "They don't define me anymore." The bitter taste of coffee felt almost sweet in her mouth. The chains that once held her voice had finally broken. That afternoon, Emily walked into another meeting, this time without hesitation. The table buzzed with chatter, but her presence quieted the noise. She sat near the center, not at the edges anymore. Emily said firmly, "I have ideas I'd like to propose." The words carried without tremor. The manager nodded, motioning for her to continue. She opened her notebook, lines no longer scribbles of doubt, but strategies etched with confidence. Daniel caught her eye, giving the smallest nod, as though saying, "This is what I saw in you all along." Emily felt her chest expand, the air finally hers to command. She whispered inside, "This is my place now." Evening fell, and Emily left the office into a city alive with lights. The sidewalks glowed with neon reflections, strangers brushing past. Yet, she didn't feel invisible anymore. She whispered, "Every step forward is mine." Daniel caught up beside her, coffee cup in hand as usual. He said, "Still think you're invisible?" Emily laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not anymore." The simplicity of the moment felt monumental. The world hadn't changed overnight, but she had. Fear still lingered, but it no longer ruled. The night air felt vast, a canvas instead of a weight. She walked faster, not escaping, but embracing the unknown. At home, Emily sat by the window, city lights flickering like stars below. She opened her notebook, not with trembling hands but with certainty. She wrote the words aloud as her pen moved. "I am not what they called me. I am not the silence they forced. I am my own voice." Her voice carried into the empty room, strong and unbroken. Emily closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She whispered, "This is only the beginning." The city outside pulsed with life, and she felt it echo in her chest. The final silence wasn't heavy. It was hers, calm and free.